The violence in Ukraine continues to make headlines around the world as concerns rise around how long Russia's invasion of the country could last. But one organization is pointing to the deeper impact of war on the future generations of countries plagued with conflict. According to Yasmine Sherif, Director of Education Cannot Wait, the UN's Global Fund for Education in Emergencies, Ukraine is one of many crisis countries facing targeted attacks on education. The organization points to the 222 million crisis-affected children worldwide that are in need of educational support. And this violence around schools has a lasting impact on not only the futures of children in such countries, but the futures of the countries themselves. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this is Miss Yasmine Sherif herself. Ma'am, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with the war in Ukraine, ma'am. How has this violence impacted education and schools in the country in particular?
Well, it's had a terrifying, devastating impact. Over 700 schools have been targeted, and it appears that there have been intentional targeting of education facilities, which of course is prohibited under international law. We are speaking about a school-age population of 5.7 million children and adolescents who are affected by this conflict. We have 2.2 million among them who are in urgent need of education support. They can't go to school. The schools are being bombed. There's destruction, and the overall danger of that conflict forces them on into remote learning, either across the border or from home, but even that is not sufficient when infrastructure is being destroyed.
And unfortunately, Ukraine is one of the many crisis-affected countries where schools could be the target of violence. Why are schools the target of violence in the first place?
Well, first of all, schools are targeted around the globe. We see it in Nigeria, we see it in Cameroon, we see it in the Sahel, and during the conflict in Syria and so forth. And we see it even in Afghanistan, where girls' secondary education is being affected. Warring parties either intentionally targeted because it's a way of breaking down the social fabric, making sure that the next generation is not educated. They use it to store weapons or use it to launch attacks, which is also prohibited under international law. So often, I would say frequently, it's the children and the youth of a society that are the immediate target, suffering the brunt of an armed conflict.
And considering that children are our future, and I know you just touched on this a little bit, but how does all of this impact the future progress of these crisis-affected countries?
Well, I travel a lot, and I went to Moldova and I met with refugee children and youth arriving there with their mothers. I've traveled across the Sahel, Mali, Chad, South Sudan, in Afghanistan, around the globe. You see children and young people who are traumatized, distraught, and are falling behind in their learning. And as a result, they are exposed to other dangers in a much greater, to a much greater extent. Girls are married away at a very young age, unwanted pregnancies. They're forced into trafficking, which is part of the war economy. Boys are drawn in to militias, terrorist groups, or armies, becoming child soldiers rather than pursuing an education. And as a result, because today a new report by Education Cannot Wait shows that there are 222 million children and adolescents in conflicts, in forced displacement and climate-induced disasters who are no access to a quality education. 222 million dreams risk being lost and turned into devastating consequences as those I have outlined. And that will have an impact, a consequence on all of us, whether we live in the Sahel or we live in Canada, the United States, or in Europe. We are all going to be affected by it.
Some really heartbreaking information there, ma'am. Just about 30 seconds left here, but what can our Canadian viewers do to help?
Well, Canada is a generous country of great solidarity. Education cannot wait. It's the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Conflict and Crisis. We have a high-level conference, pledging conference, financing conference, hosted by the government of Switzerland, together with Germany, Canada, Niger, and South Sudan in Geneva, Switzerland, in February 2023. Join our movement. 222 million dreams. Speak to your politicians, speak to your private sector, get them engaged, and be there in Geneva and help us save the dreams and make them come true for 222 million children and youth. It is possible. We need you, Canada. Thank you.
Change is possible. Ms. Sherif, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so very much to you. Thank you very much. Bye.
We'll be right back.